those funds that do not actually qualify for the support that is made available, then we will see the funds redirected into other businesses, other profitable businesses. So while multiple projects have been launched over the years to strengthen local systems and institutions for service provisions to women farmers, these projects will still fail to yield the desired result due to limited number of qualified women businesses. So these two examples really paint a very realistic picture of what we might see in 2030 or the years leading up to 2030 if we do not take the necessary steps now. The second scenario, as I said, is a positive one, and a positive because we can see the influence of a skilled and prosperous Africa due to the right policies, due to the right support coming from both the private sector as well as the public sector. And so the second scenario, we'll use two examples again. The ACPZ program, which is a special agro-industrial processing zone program. And this is an initiative launched and supported by the African Development Bank, and it is very closely aligned to the bank's Feed Africa strategy for agricultural transformation, as well as the trust essentially what needs to be done through the ACPZ programs, where the AAC is also working with the African Development Bank, is to create a development hub for agriculture, literally from production to market, where you can concentrate all the activities, where you can concentrate production, processing, packaging, logistics, everything into one zone, into one area. You concentrate the availability of investment in developing that area, and the investment will come from the private sector as well as the public sector, where the public sector mandate
Ben, can you please wrap up, Ben? We're running out of time. Please wrap up. Thank you very much.
Yes, perfect. So when you look at the concentration of all the necessary infrastructure into one zone, you're able to produce and to take it to market. And the reason why this is a successful project is because you're now combining that with skilled labor. You're now combining that with the necessary investment that is able to support the development of the ACPZ program. Digital agriculture is another example where for you to be able to utilize digital agriculture, the digital aspect of agriculture, you need proper training, you need proper program that mutually channels the transfer of skills and technology to those that you need. So the shift has been achieved through the dedicated training program to unlock full potential by connecting innovation, skills, and value creation through the dedicated national human capital development master plans. Now, just to quickly go into the final part of my presentation, since we are running out of time. Whether African economies will be able to prioritize human capital development in the development agenda or not will be determined by the policy that are taken out. And to be completely honest, the more realistic scenario for 2013 is a fragmented one where you will see the integration of human capital development in some national master plans taking place in some countries, and others where we will still need some support from external partners, development partners, in order to prioritize human capital development. So how do we go in achieving this? We're presenting three key points here for one. The first one is the development of Made in Africa brand and label. And this has to go through the African Free Continental Trade area that is looking at the Made in Africa brand, and how do we support that? How do we make sure that we develop a brand that will look at quality standard across the entire continent, and that will require proper technical training and through agricultural schools programs for the purpose of exports. The second point is to look at the role that the digital agriculture will play, because you need now to combine digital agriculture, the adoption of digital agriculture, with the investment that is linked to technical assistance to enhance relevant skill sets. The third part is by building back better. And this is where, again, when you look at the potential of the continent, when you look at the number of policies and discussions that have taken place the past 10, 15, 20 years, we tend to come up with great policies, with great ideas, but the implementation part of it is absolutely expected. So once we have our policy informed, we need to look at the implementation strategy, and we need to look at the monitoring part of it. And that's the only way that we will be able to achieve a zero hunger continent by 2030.
Thank you.
But can be done differently. I think we've touched on this in our early part of the presentation. One, we need to incorporate human capital development with the cadet initiative. For those who are not familiar with cadet, this is an initiative that was launched by the African Union to boost agricultural productivity and achieve an agricultural growth rate of at least 6% per annum.
Ben, thank you very much.
Some countries
we're gonna have to leave it.
Some are not doing very well.
Ben, we're gonna have to leave it here. We apologize for that interruption. We still have few speakers that needs to go through, and the program is quite tight. But nevertheless, we appreciate what you've just shared with us. Through Sol, we will circulate your presentation for colleagues that may not have had an opportunity to engage with all the issues that you've raised, which are quite critical. I mean, for me, the key highlight is the extent to which the African Agri Council seeks to leverage the entire value chain of agriculture, and most importantly, the role which women are expected to play, and how agriculture has been put at the forefront in some countries compared to mining. So those are some of the snippets that we've all picked up, which we could leverage on as we proceed. Without any waste of time, colleagues, we need to move with speed. I'm going to call upon Ellen Mukoki, who is the CEO at the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to give us a position based on how we can move the needle a bit further. For those who may not know what SACI is the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry is a highly recognized national umbrella body of local and regional chamber of commerce. All big businesses and industry associations are direct affiliates of SACI. SACI also serves as a secretariat for the International Chamber of Commerce and a member of the World Chamber of Commerce. On that note, let me welcome SACI. Mr. Mulok, the floor is yours.
Thank you, colleagues, and good morning. And thanks for the opening remarks, Dr. Nimrod. I think that this is it's probably the right time to be having these kinds of conversations, because sometimes people don't know where we come from. Just to add a bit on what you just said about who we are, we obviously play the intersection role between big business, big government, and big community groups, big labor, within the network environment when it comes to policy, regulation, legislation, around those particular areas, to look at the socio-economic impact of any of those pieces of either policy, legislation, or regulation in terms of what the impact will be. Ourselves were completely and totally aligned with the idea of solving the big problems that are facing South Africa, especially around what many would refer to as a triple challenge of unemployment, poverty, inequality. We do it deliberately for some reason. Add the piece around nutrition, which has a particular bias around why we think that that's very critical as an enabler in particular, because we've seen quite a number of these things. I know that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, they talk about hunger, and we sort of thought maybe the issue around hunger needs to be debated differently, because you can be full but not nutrition dense. And so that's a very critical issue in respect of these issues as we discuss them. And we always say that it's about the 4 Ps. It's people, it's purpose, it's politics and the policy. And to that extent, when we talk about free trade, it's going to be very difficult to talk about free trade if we don't equalize the level of investment or the enablers that we all require. So one of the difficult aspects is that if you look at the World Economic Forum, the Global Competitiveness Index report, and you look at the 12 pillars that they talk about, the issue around the size of the market is one of the key issues that gets to be measured in terms of how competitive you are in your own environment. So to that extent, the bigger economies like South Africa would be making a fundamental error of judgment if they assumed that trade with Africa is supposed to be about South Africa selling goods into Africa, but not creating markets for our own goods and services in that particular market. We make this other point, of course, that in the last 100 years, about 8 non-Western countries have moved their economies from developing to developed. And you count amongst those Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore, or Hong Kong, Australia, Russia, and Israel. And if you look at what they have managed to do in that last 100 years is to build very strongly around the idea of the Human Development Index. So that's a very important piece in terms of what is it that we mean by that, because if you, again, do not create universal access to skills and competencies, then you build an asymmetric system that isn't necessarily going to be equitable. There's absolutely zero upside for South Africa to assume we can sell goods into Zambia, into Malawi, into Lesotho, and yet those particular countries themselves are not actually developing. And I know that there are aspects when we discuss this area around human development that we sometimes really do not include in our construct in this conversation. But the assumption that's always been made is that the problem with skills and competencies only arises in the public sector, and then in the private sector, you've got better skills. Maybe not, I don't know, because we work with a lot of the private sector leaders, and I will give an example, and I'm sure I've given it to you before, that one of our members is in Ekurhuleni. I want to mention it, but they run a very successful precision engineering company, very high-tech, family-owned business, 4 or 5 people there, doing very well, $110 million net NPAT per annum. And at some stage, we had one of these events where we're having a conversation about, because I know the governor of Lubumbashi in the DRC, and I was saying, the Chinese have used the Inga project to put in something like 1 gig of power into that particular area to develop their own mines. And the type of business that is running would be so successful there, it would be 10 times bigger. And I was saying to him, why are you not looking at Lubumbashi? And he looked at me and says, oh yeah, I understand. And when he walked around, he was having a drink, some wine or something. I don't know whether the wine made him to think differently. And he came back to me a few minutes later and said, by the way, tell me, what's Lubumbashi? And in lies the fundamental problem as you discuss the South African problem, that if you make the assumption that people in the private sector are highly educated because they can calculate the ratio, they can tell you the next quarter's results or the next half-year interim results, how they're going to look like, and they can build a bridge and they can mix chemicals, and then you assume that they themselves are at a level where they can understand what this is supposed to be about, then it would be a mistake. The reason I mention in these 8 countries is that if you look at one of the biggest growing regions right now, which is the ASEAN countries, that will include things like Thailand and Vietnam and all those places, Cambodia, you will notice that the people who are driving most of the capital deployment and most of the investment in that particular area, 650 million people and growing at 5 to 7% growth rates, it's actually these former Asian tigers. So South Africa is freezing in the headlights around what it ought to be able to do. Now this example that I'm making is indicative, as a matter of fact, of the general, right, not everyone, of the general level of SA incorporated leadership in terms of their own executive and leadership development. So it would be a mistake, and I know, of course, the president consults us a lot and talks to us about the economy, and who should be finance minister, whatever the case might be. But I think that lacuna that has opened where people themselves are not aware of what they're not aware of is that the South African private sector leaders themselves need a lot of development in understanding what is going on. And I think it's a lot more easier to always, reduce things to Afro-pessimism or racism. But I think that they themselves are struggling in appreciating and understanding what the opportunity is in the rest of the continent. So we're not building that type of leadership at this particular point in time. And I think that it's an area that requires urgent attention purely because they are the drivers of capital. So the South African economy is still run by people who come from 5 professions or so. It's the chartered accountants because they happen to be CFOs in companies and they sit down and they determine whether the company is making profit or does not make profit. And then you've got the actuaries, and these people who work for one as well as asset management companies and insurance companies, and they look at risk as whether you should be putting money in something or not. And then you have the bankers, people like where I came from certainly, who make these supposedly objective decisions about whether you should get money to fund the project or you shouldn't. And then you have the engineers because they mix the chemical, they dig up the mineral from the ground, and they can build the plant and the equipment and run a power system and do whatever the things that they're actually doing. And then the economists obviously will tell everybody else whether the environment is okay for us to invest. And I'm making these points deliberately. So my lawyer friends always complain, why don't you count us? And I say, no, don't worry. I say, all these 5, they hear from you. You know more important. But the point really that we're making is that if you, when it comes to dealing with this, you're engaging this question at a serious level of investing, of capital deployment, of building the piece of infrastructure that you need to have and equalizing the opportunity from universal access to high skills, quality skills and competencies. You are not going to do that if you're not appreciating the restrictions or the limitations that you actually have. So the people who come mostly from these 5 professions in the continent of South Africa would continuously come from the former white universities. Okay, so you have to be able to deal with this because that's a very serious issue from a policy, a regulation, and legislation point of view. I have a son who's 19 or something. He used to be at St. John's down the road. And the head of the physical science department at St. John's has a PhD in physics. And if you go to Villa as a street where we all go and have fun, there are 2 high schools there, Perfeni and Orlando West. And I'm going to hazard a guess that none of the teachers there were teaching physical science have got physics 3 from a university. So you're creating an unequal. You can't compete on education if you want to develop the country. It's just not possible to do that. So if you have money in South Africa, you can go and pay the 180,000 per annum at St. John's for your kid to pass and to have a better chance of passing, not because they're talented. They're not more talented, they just have better access and a better resource allocation in terms of being able to do, in terms of being able to do that. So you can't avoid this particular piece, program director, because it's one of the most fundamental pieces when we talk about how do you equalize the opportunity, how do you get yourself to a place where
amplify a little bit. Yeah.
All right. So how do you get yourself to a position where you can equalize? So in the environment where today we talk about what organizations want to talk about ESG, the environment, the social factors, and the governance, and the social piece then becomes one of the most fundamental pieces of what we need to be discussing around diversity, inclusion, and equity, because that piece around equity is very important. So you can't create a frame for equal trade if you don't create a frame for equal investment that is going to be equitable. Not because you're trying to be nice to the Mozambicans, or you're trying to be nice to the Rwandese, or you're trying to be nice to the Congolese. No, because it doesn't make sense for you to sustain a program of economic development over a longer period of time if you're not going to be responsible for driving the investment of the capital deployment in those particular environments. Because if you do that, then you have a sustainable program And when we talk about how do you resolve these issues that the United Nations talks about in the Sustainable Development Program, you can be able to do that because you can be at least dominant in an environment that is equitable from a partnership point of view throughout the region first and then the rest of the continent. So Africa has got to be able to say it is fair of them to look to South Africa because the skills do exist here to that extent, at least the technical skills exist. The piece that I'm raising, which is a lacuna, is more the leadership type skills in terms of whether we have the right component of the cohort of leadership in the private sector to be able to drive this particular agenda. Because I can tell you now the accountants and the actuaries and the engineers in South Africa, the economists, are not matching to this particular beat yet. Because I think that we made the environment to be particularly easy. Maybe for now, if you're running Standard Bank, all that you need to do is to look at your ROE and your ROA and cost to income ratio. You're making a profit, you're not making a profit. You can deliver the 15 coins to the shareholders, everyone is fine. If you ever worked with Old Mutual, they'll always say, every time we deploy capital, we're looking at CPI plus 10. So you know that every time I can give them 18%, it's okay. But that's not the story today around the kinds of decisions that need to be taken from a leadership point of view. So I'm not trying to preach a negative story. I'm just saying that we have an opportunity to be able to drive the agenda for change and renewal in South Africa and the rest of Africa, so that when we talk about free trade, there's no such a thing as free trade if that free trade is not equitable trade. It's not actually going to happen. We, as the South African Chamber of Commerce, a few years ago, we did an MOU with the Zambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And the then Minister for Trade, Commerce and Industry in Zambia, Minister Margaret, she gave a keynote. We were here at the Hyatt Hotel. And I recall one of the things that she had to say. She said two things that I thought were important takeaways. Says number one, are you aware that Zambia actually has almost 60% of the entire water resource of the SADC region, yet 80% of that water ends up in the Indian Ocean as waste. And she was leaving that night to go back to Lusaka the following day to open one of these warehouse places, that sell spare parts, whatever. South African type outfit which was opening in Lusaka, and she was making this point. I'm going to tell you that 90% of the goods that are going to be sold in that shop are not being made in Zambia. They are actually going to be made in South Africa. And that's not the type of trade that I'm trying to argue we ought to be looking for. It may suit us temporarily as South Africans that we are able to be dominant and we're selling all our goods and services, but sustainably, it doesn't make any sense to be able to do that. So we talk about the need to create this environment, the infrastructure environment, what we refer to as the 4 lines to heaven, to the sustainable program, so that it's a launch pad that then enables you to create that level of platform that is a multi-integrated platform, which you can then be able to use to drive quite a number of the very important developmental pieces that you would like to articulate as part of this work that we're trying to do. Because the point is, it's not about we want Standard Bank to make more money or we want MTN to make more money. No, we want to create an MTN that's going to be a behemoth over the next 50 to 100 years, so that's going to be such a legacy business. But doing that in partnership with our partners where they are outside of South Africa, when they themselves are developing quite a number of the things that they need to develop. And so these 4 pieces, lines to heaven, we refer to is, it's urgent and critical that we have to have the energy lines. Whether you're complaining about COP26-27 or you're complaining about coal, but you need to build the energy lines. South Africa, from what we know, is electrified probably 85% of the time, and most of it is the old South Africa and not the new one in terms of the expectation. Yet the rest of Africa is less than 10%. Now, of course, most of the countries, we had a meeting with the CEO of ESCOM a few months ago, and one of the proposals that we're making to them is that since ESCOM is people dense or people heavy, you are not going to find a solution for ESCOM until you deal with the issue of probably more than 10,000 people overstaffed in that environment, and most of those people are in the A band. So one of the opportunities you have is that why don't ESCOM create a consulting group that does not require capital deployment, and it can walk around in Africa building these power stations. So if you don't have energy across the 3 lines, so there's generation, transmission, and distribution, we're not going to get off onto a good start around that. Now, of course, someone is going to make the argument, but the fiscal environments around those countries, there's no money. But that is not necessarily true if you're an investment banker and you can think very creatively. Because one of the items is that the things that we've learned up until now are not necessarily helping us to solve the problems that we face today. And I know my friends at the Reserve Bank complain very bitterly. Every time you want to question them, they want to scream independence of the Reserve Bank, and we ask them independent from what? So this is before they're accused of being RET, so you keep quiet, you're not getting bored. The key question is that we have to be able to ask all of our institutions whether the things that we know today are helping us to solve the problems that we have today. Because if we don't, we'll keep saying this is a macroeconomic framework that is working for us, because we're getting an award from an international Euro Money magazine that says that we're the best at managing the fiscals, yet millions and millions of people remain hungry and they remain out of the system. And because we refuse to say, let's rather question our own decision making, maybe the system that we have is not actually working for us, and not maybe, actually it isn't. And therefore, are we going to allow a level of disruptive innovation that is making sense so that we can move forward? So this piece around energy is very important, and I'm making this noise when we're having a conversation. So it's yeah, but we're not going to Africa, we're too busy right now trying to get load shedding sorted. And we say, no, don't worry, you don't have to think at that level. Take Slim Salim, who started this outfit called Exponential Organizations. And he likes to say that when you try to drive disruptive innovations in large organizations, and that goes for large countries, right? The immune system of that organization is going to come out to attack. And the idea that he's always proposed is that if you want to do that, you put a disruptive innovation team on the edge of the organization, away from that organization, and ask them to go and do the piece of work. Because large organizations, by their very nature, they are built to resist change and withstand risk. So you can't touch that kind of stuff. But unfortunately, the very nature of big organizations is that they are stopping progress from actually taking place. So the point we're making, therefore, is that there's no continent that is as rich as Africa. Most of our countries are landlocked, and there is no reason why you cannot build a power station and be paid by way for mineral resources. I mean, China is doing something similar in South Sudan, where they've agreed to build the entire roads infrastructure, and in return for something like 3,000 barrels of crude per month. So these kinds of ideas where you can use arbitrage to try and build things that are going to be sustainable is something that's important, obviously. The second line we talk about is the rail infrastructure, which is very, very, very key. Many of our countries are landlocked, and because they're landlocked, it's very difficult to be running trucks up and down. So the riches are sitting in the ground underneath, but we're not taking advantage of the commodities boom, purely because, and building our own industrialization, because we don't necessarily have the right logistics environment to do that. The British, most of you will know, are building something that they just commissioned called HS2, and this train is going to be running from London at a speed of 132 kilometers per hour. It will break into Manchester and Leeds at that level. And there are people who've got trains that are running at speeds higher than that. So we have to be able to significantly say we want to appoint a rail czar. South Africa now has something about 25,000 kilometers of rail, and the rest of the continent there isn't much. So we need that high-speed rail to be able to move both people and goods, because the riches are there, but the riches can't get to market if you want to track them, and so you become very much not a commodity country. And you are not going to be able to drive this tourism in a way that's significant if you can't move people very rapidly. Many of these environments in Africa, you've got to go and fly to France before you get there, and they're here in Africa. But if you have high-speed rail, you can get to places much more quicker. The third component is water and sanitation infrastructure. As I said with Minister Macron, she was saying there's water, but it's ending up in the Indian Ocean. South Africa complains about lack of water. Water is a very, very important resource. Everything grows in those regions, the Great Lakes regions. But we're not taking advantage of building a very strong platform for agri as well as agri processing. Most of you go to places like McDonald's, by the way, but I don't know if you're aware that the little tomato sauce that is used in the chips at McDonald's is all being imported by South Africa. It's not been made in South Africa. So there are massive opportunities in that particular regard around the space of agri and agri processing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be taking place in South Africa. But South Africa must put out the capital, the deployment. We've got some of the best agri and soil experts coming out of this country, but they're sitting here instead of being out there fighting for South Africa and for the rest of the continent so that we can develop those places. And then the last piece, of course, has got to be the tech piece around the information technologies piece, that we've got to be building the fiber optic cables. We've got to go into the rural areas via satellite. And many of you are familiar with quite a number of universities and platforms like Coursera. 120, 130 universities are putting content free on Coursera. And I don't know if I told you, Dr. Nimrod, I did a course there from Yale. There's a Yale University course. Any of you who are interested in negotiations, if you haven't seen, it's the top negotiations course. It takes 9 weeks. It takes 9 weeks, and I make this example with this course, very top class. It's done by the dean there. Very, very good course. Basically for free. You know, they ask you for a contribution that's only going to be 1,500. But the point being made about that is that if you engage on that course, you need something like 3 to 5 hours per week of class content. And those videos are HDMI. And so in the context of South Africa, that's going to cost you somewhere around 2.1 gigs to look at that. So if you look at the cost around that, it's very high. And that's why this whole thing around spectrum moving from SAPC is something that was supposed to be very urgent, because when it unleashes that, it creates that level of environment for people to be able to access skills, technology, competencies much more quicker outside of just the area of communications. And that's a very important thing, in that we resource the right thing, so it's not the 9 or the 12 billion that is required for private or anyone like that. Any kid sitting in, Nambiti or Wanongoma ought to be able to access that Economics 302 course from VET in a way that's interactive using tech, to be able to do so, because when you build the infrastructure for telecoms, you create that level of access that is quick, that is free, and that can be scaled, and that gives you the level of critical mass that you need. So I think, Nimrod, I've said enough. You've only given me 20 minutes, but our understanding of the equation is that without disruptive innovation, a lot of the problems that we're dealing with today will not be solved with the ideas that we have today. The people are highly talented, but they need to be given an opportunity to try and see the world in a way that is much more expansive. And South Africans, I think that they need to stop being very insular. I think that we're a very insular place in the context of South Africa is supposed to be a small piece of Europe lost somewhere in Africa. And I think that the fact that our name is the direction also causes a problem to just articulate and see ourselves as African. When we talk to South Africans, Africa is something somewhere. It's not. We are not Africa. And I think that change, that step change, needs to happen. So if we don't drive this change, we need to be able to understand that we need to drive the leadership, and the leadership is going to be a very significant component in the things that we do, so that the partnerships that are going to come from this place in all our organizations where we are would be the partnerships that are sustainable, that can solve fundamentally the big problems and get the young people to come in, because there's a psychologists, cognitive and behavioral psychologists call this shame and complex trauma, that we assume, we think that a lot of the people who are young are struggling with, because notwithstanding the fact that they have at least a better platform with skills and competencies, they are just so disengaged and very self-absorbed right now. And you're not going to be able to build a country by excluding people who are young, because they are supposed to be the core. Mr. Jigalana, they are supposed to be the people who are important this weekend, not the 60-year-olds. The 30-year-olds are supposed to be. When Dave Cameron took over the Conservative Party, he was only 35, and at the age of 39, he was at number 10, and still having babies there. Same with Macron, same with quite a number of people. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with old people, but we do need to have a mix of skills, but we are not doing enough in terms of enabling the young people to have the tools so that they can be able to solve problems. And South Africa has become a place where everyone complains a lot, and we've got very few people who've got ideas. So I think, colleagues, thank you for giving us a chance to share some of the ideas with you. I would like to say lastly, because I know a lot of people are engaged in many organizations, and when you do exercise leadership in your organizations, you must always appreciate that leadership by its very nature is dangerous, it's not easy. And I think Martin Linsky at the Kennedy School, he likes to say that leadership is not a person, leadership is an action. And the people who are in authority, they need to create an environment for the leadership to take place. And so when you do that piece, you need to be able to understand that many of the things that are big that you need to do, you are going to hit turbulence if you, he talks about 6 things that you need to resolve, personal relationships that you need to resolve, the first of which is don't try to do things without partners, so you need to always have partners. Because when you drive big qualitative leadership ideas, you want to have partners that can work with you, who are important in the organization or outside of the organization, who can assist you to deliver on your agenda. Because you are trying to move people at a mental level, intellectual level, emotional, as well as their values. So you need your partners. The second relationship that you need to fix is the relationship with people who oppose you. It's a mistake not to spend time with people who oppose you, because if you do spend time with them, you get to know what their anxieties and insecurities are. And maybe it turns out sometimes that the things that you can actually resolve. And in all organizations, there are people who are always going to oppose you. But because if you don't do that, the change that you want to see happen is not going to happen because you are ignoring that. The third, of course, is the one that they say is the relationship with troublemakers who exist in all organizations. And 25% of the time they say they're very useful. These are people who tell who's pregnant in the organization. Even the boyfriend doesn't know, but they know. You have to spend time with them to understand what they do. And the fourth is with your supporters, because sometimes you need to check whether the alignment is the same. Sometimes people will support you for their own agenda that has got nothing to do with what you are trying to do. And the fifth is the relationship with the senior authority that everyone talks about. Don't try to do big changes without talking to go get advice. We know it's your decision, it's within your mandate. God knows what it's about. That is my mandate. We know that. Yeah. Go talk to the chairman. I'm trying to sound you out. What do you think? Can I do this? Because some of these big changes that you're trying to drive may be affecting, and we saw the people who in senior authority, they feel the vibration in organizations, right? So you're trying to do this big change, you're trying to exit the CFO. But you don't know that the CFO was brought here for the chairman. Yeah. The chairman is related to the CEO's uncle, who built the chairman's career one day in the past. Yeah. So when you move that, you need to go talk to senior people, try and assess the environment. And the last one is the relationship with yourself. Check your own causes, what's driving you. Check your own level of health, because it's society, there's a lot of complex trauma. Lots of people are running around with very typical personality and mental disorders that are undiagnosed. Just check whether you're okay, check the people that you're working with. So within the time allocated, thank you, Program Director, for the invite to just share this.
Okay. Thank you. Just a pity we can't, get the applause from colleagues who have joined us virtually because HCOM has just done it again. Thank you very much for that insight, Ellen. What is critical that I've picked up from you is the extent to which South Africa's development is intertwined with that of the continent, and how South Africa perceives itself in relation to the continent. That it is okay for us to invest for purpose of our own short-term gains, without realizing that if we do not invest in the continent to try and bring everybody to a level of equity, the trade regime that has been envisaged is likely to be longer. So it is important for collaboration in the context of us having to invest in those countries, not for purpose of us just deriving material benefit, because they don't have technical skills, they don't have infrastructure, they're not at the same level where we are at. But there lies, in your view, the leadership lacuna, that if South African leadership, both in private and public sector organization, were to understand the long-term goal of the free trade agreement, they would think differently insofar as plowing or investing in those countries, even though at risk at initial stages, where in the more long term, they're likely to see the trade agreement needle moving a bit forward. So that's in a nutshell. That I could just sum up my observation based on what you just indicated. we're going to move forward. I'm not sure if His Excellency Andre Nzapieke is on board.
We are offline. We are in
I hope he has made it. We can now jump to him.
He was online.
He was online, okay.
In fact, he's going to speak in French, and then when he finishes his presentation, she's going to interpret for us.
Okay, thank you.
It's him.
Okay. Are we ready? Check us. Okay. Colleagues online, are you able to hear us? We had a bit of a glitch there. We want to proceed. Can you maybe just unmute one or two persons so that we... Sipati Modife, can you hear us? Sipati? Well, I mean, I'm sure we audible now. We can proceed.
Yes. After his presentation and her interpretation, we are going to take a 10-minute break to grab a snack, a pre-lunch snack. Because some of us...
Yeah, we need to take tablets.
Thank
you very much, colleagues. Let's proceed. We now welcome on stage His Excellency Andre Nzapieke. I hope I'm pronouncing it well. His Excellency is an ambassador to South Africa. He worked in Central Africa in development sector, studying many villages in the country. He later worked as a consultant, as also taught in universities. In the early 90s, he was at the Security Council of the government, where he was briefly a Minister of Rural Development. He's a technocrat, and he rose to Secretary General of the African Development Bank and Vice President of the Development Bank of Central African States from 2010 to 2011. Without any waste of time, we are...
Sorry.
All right. Okay. I beg your pardon. There's a bit of a mix-up in terms of who's online now. We're now welcoming Ambassador. We're now welcoming Ambassador Mohamed Fazou Deme, who is a former technical advisor to several government ministers in Senegal. The floor is yours, Ambassador. You're welcome.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mohamed Fazou Deme from Senegal. I will deliver my speech in English, in French, as I asked to the ambassador Mobile. Chers participants à ce panel, bonjour. Tout d'abord, chères mesdames et messieurs, agréez mon hommage déférent à l'endroit de tous les panélistes et de ma sincère admiration pour le public qui vous suit. Aujourd'hui, j'ai l'honneur de m'exprimer devant ces éminentes personnalités avec qui je partage cette passion du développement du tourisme africain. Et c'est l'occasion pour moi de remercier son Excellence Saul Mogoli qui a bien voulu m'associer à cette réflexion pour célébrer les réalisations et politiques africaines qui ont permis d'atténuer les risques d'effondrement du tourisme liés à la COVID-19. Si nous avons réussi individuellement le pari, il faut se convaincre de la mise en pratique d'une vision continentale partagée pour relever les défis du moment, au rang desquels se trouve en ordre de priorité le désenclavement aérien et routier qui prive les Africains de leur volonté d'aller et de venir, de développer le commerce, le tourisme et de maintenir la flamme de la fraternité africaine, l'amour du partage et de l'unité. J'ai également le plaisir de rendre un vibrant hommage à M. Poubert, le chairman de l'African Tourism Board, l'infatigable soldat de la vision partagée du tourisme africain. Ces plaidoyers sont encore retentissants dans nos cœurs et nos esprits. Qu'ils soient remerciés. L'Afrique, une destination touristique multiple, fait face à des mutations économiques, sociales, culturelles, générationnelles. Ainsi, avec la révolution technologique, tout a changé, même nos habitudes. Nous devons dès lors nous réadapter, nous rééduquer, nous former et nous engager dans la voie de la transformation et de la transition économique. En un mot, le reverdissement de l'écosystème pour nous accrocher sur les objectifs de développement durable afin de sortir notre continent de la pauvreté, du sous-développement et de l'exclusion. Revenons sur le sujet de la conférence, objet de notre rencontre, et faisant référence à la politique touristique du Sénégal, je puis vous dire, à travers mes 30 ans d'expérience dans le secteur privé et dans le gouvernement au niveau stratégique, qu'il y a lieu de redonner une plus grande attention et une large compréhension à la transversalité du tourisme et à la chaîne de valeur touristique pour soutenir la culture, l'artisanat, l'agriculture, les petits métiers d'artisans et d'artistes pour un développement à la base qui soit inclusif. Chers amis, le tourisme doit être endogène, mais nous nous focalisons trop sur les grandes chaînes et marques étrangères du tourisme mondial et cela nous éloigne de nos réalités, de nos cultures. Également, il nous exclut les nationaux et les Africains de la diaspora du tourisme domestique, qui est et qui doit être notre premier marché, dont l'un des objectifs est de promouvoir notre tourisme à travers le monde. Les infrastructures aéroportières, le train express régional, les autoroutes, les ponts, les centres de formation, les subventions des gouvernements, les crédits des banques, les suspensions de dettes fiscales, etc. par les États. Au-delà de l'énorme pression fiscale que vivent les acteurs du tourisme et qui font que la plupart des entreprises touristiques sont dans l'informel et cela tue davantage notre tourisme. D'ailleurs, ces importantes mesures d'engagement et d'accompagnement du gouvernement ne portent leurs fruits que lorsqu'ils sont adossés à une vision globale du tourisme africain, à une charte africaine du tourisme, à un code africain du tourisme, à un projet africain du tourisme, à des produits et des produits touristiques innovants, bien de chez nous, qui reflètent notre diversité, notre identité, nos valeurs et nos aspirations capables de soutenir la résilience du secteur. Je suis convaincu que seul un portage institutionnel au niveau de l'Union africaine, avec des investisseurs et des investissements africains, à travers un leadership africain, que nous pouvons redorer l'image du tourisme africain et relancer définitivement l'économie du tourisme africain. Nous devons mutualiser nos efforts pour être plus représentatifs et plus forts au sein de l'Organisation mondiale du tourisme pour défendre et gérer nous-mêmes les problèmes du tourisme africain. J'en appelle à notre sens élevé de responsabilité et d'ambassadeur du tourisme africain pour enfin présider aux destinées du tourisme mondial. Je rappelle, chers collègues, chers panélistes et participants, que c'est autour de l'union des idées et des moyens, de l'auto-emploi, de la formation, de la promotion des jeunes et du savoir-faire africain que nous retrouverons les belles lettres de notre noblesse du tourisme africain. Et je vous remercie de votre attention, ambassadeur du Sénégal.
Merci.
The ambassador spoke about different things. He spoke about expressing his sincere admiration to be part of the webinar today. And he thanked Abu Sol as well for inviting him. Then he spoke about the priorities that the Africa Trade has and the volunteering of commerce and tourism fundamentals with love that we need to share as a continent. He also spoke about Monsieur Kubera, I don't know who's Monsieur Kuberan, who's a soldier of engaging in the African tourism in Africa. He said we should be proud and we should use the technologies that we have to adapt and to transform the economy in the continent. And we must understand that we have been excluded so long within the framework of the tourism and within the global tourism. He also spoke about the fair policies in Senegal and for private sectors and public sectors as the attention of transforming, foreseeing the support in agriculture and culture as well. And he also talked about tourism being the vehicle for a domestic market and cultural around the world for import and export in different routes, such as air, road, and water as well. He also spoke about the youth as well to play a significant role in representing and transforming the African continent, especially in tourism.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ambassador, thank you very much for that insightful engagement. You've certainly given us food for thought in terms of how your contribution or how the trade can be expedited. It's quite clear that you're quite passionate about tourism, you're quite passionate about youth, you're quite passionate about involvement of women. Those are some of the issues that would find expression in policy conversations that could ensure that the trade agreement as expounded and as far as 2030 UN agenda becomes a reality. You want to perhaps maybe convey that?
Monsieur l'ambassadeur, c'est un plaisir pour engager avec vous. Et nous avons voir que vous êtes très inspiré par le tourisme en Afrique pour voir des femmes et des jeunes pour motiver et faire beaucoup de choses pour changer le continent. Comme vous êtes les patients du continent, nous voulons que nous travaillions ensemble pour gérer les problèmes de l'Afrique par rapport à ce qu'on fait avec la façon de AfCFTA, comme on l'a fait. On vous remercie à tous nos cœurs pour votre travail et vous continuez à travailler. Vous aussi trouvez que vous continuez à travailler avec nous dans ce secteur de tourisme. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup indeed. On that note, can I suggest that we have a quick break? According to my time, it's 7 minutes to 12 o'clock. Can we convene exactly at 12:05? Is that okay? 12:05. Let's take a quick short break and reconvene at 12:05. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You're doing great.
Thank you.
Thabela.
So was it a happy meeting? No, oh yeah.
Because that time we were on a day but listening to the noises in
This one.
Sure. I've got your number. Okay.
from the Swati and they
Maybe I give you my master's in join our office.
Oh, lovely. You're doing your master's degree. Oh, lovely.
because during the meeting
What are you focusing on?
International relations, but francophone countries.
Person to speak to. He's with DACO. He used to be the deputy commissioner. I used to do so. He's now.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
Mr. Neswis.
Let's go. I'll contact.
Yeah, he's very high up at DACO. Because that's the Department of International Relations. He's sitting there, yeah. Yes. It's Mr. Neswis.
You're not allergic to anything.
Neswis. Swiss. Like Swiss. Neswis. Yes.
brown muffin, bread muffin, that is fine. But no chocolate muffin, any other one.
That's actually going great.
When I was Baba, when on a market, this is prepaid. I'm John. Yeah,
My name is Toro.
this is on letter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Are you I hope we'll be able to connect
My phone was connected. No, I can see.
then we were introduced to this and the scientists with all the
Siyaphila mama kunjani? Okay.
Hey, coffee is here. There's coffee.
There's coffee there.
Coffee is here. Oh, we'll break. Is it coffee or tea?
I am organized.
You are organized.
We love that.
Already. Let's go ahead.
So Ntabe is organized.
Oui.
I said, ok. Bon. C'est très bien.
D'accord.
Hello, dear.
I'm good and you?
I'm fine. I never got to know you.
Oh, my name is Masimita.
Oh, my name is Bella.
Oh, okay.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
I saw that you've got bottles of water.
Yes, we see them. Yes,
That's your hand.
yes.
Okay. Thank you. Keep in touch.
Okay.
Okay.
Are they going to bring you?
Yes, umakhelwane wami
Okay.
is organizing. Oh, bro, can I have my USB?
Oh, your USB.
Because I berek is. Yeah, we are a bit less than organized because it came, you helped here, but we forgot to link with
to link with Zoom, yeah. And that's what I was telling that guy earlier on. To show your presentation, we were supposed to have logged into Zoom.
And now I've got Zoom, it's fine, it gets in very easily.
Yeah, but you should have. It needs the ID of this meeting.
Which I have.
Which you have, yes.
Represented by the RMT Union from
Well, Miss Mushukela, okay. So I need to get something. So, ufake nezakho.
Be clever about this.
Yeah.
This latest round of strikes will show how important our members are to the running of the country. And will send a clear message that we want a good deal on job security paying conditions for our people. We have been reasonable, but it is impossible to find a negotiated settlement when the dead hand of the government is presiding over and blocking a resolution in these terms.
The strikes come at a cost to the economy in terms of lost working days. The right-wing media here have been counting that cost, yet that isn't seen how dented public support by the strikers.
The cost of living subsidy normally they should get a pay rise.
I can see why the
Ubuya kuphula umsindi.
Speaker list.
Sisibeka lana? Akusibeke la ke sisibona. Why nisibeka lapha ningasibeki la?
Isitshajile la, so masingashitisa because it's connected to the adapter.
Physically.
Yes.
Oh,
So it doesn't work if it's unplugged. And maybe it's closest to this chair, so we're putting it to the.
Awuphakamisa. Ngiyibonile le ndramangala ukuthi yini le?
Oh yes, yes.
And the glass, what is it for? Any glass?
It's just a design, I think. Because it doesn't do anything. It's just a design, honestly. So yeah, this is the speaker. It works like a normal speaker. Here's the sound and the coming from. And then, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just. Colleagues, they've decided we should have a working lunch. So come grab, we come back, we eat and yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Banana itlaubereka jwang? With an empty stomach.
With an empty stomach, you can't concentrate.
You know my presentation gets a Hussein negingotsi maubani. So Hussein, I started shifting it to a PowerPoint, so I didn't have breakfast. Havifeds, I jumped into shower, jumped into
the car.
clothes.
Here we are. There are no savings, but that's all in my tissue. Yeah, it's a little bit disorganized.
What happened?
But okay, let me go grab my plate now and then I'll come join.
Okay.
Oh, at least they brought me.
Genkan.
Israel, what happened? Was that in London, a politic?
When?
Where at his town?
Baba, mhlambe una link to this meeting.
Yeah.
Then bengisacela ukungena to this link with my phone because I have only admin rights, so I can't be a participant.
You want to see it?
The link, I can see it and then I'll just join.
I'm man. It's the old one. Hey, roll. I mean, slap.
Which million,
Eh?
Also.
Let me see. Okay, I did send it.
Yeah, all.
Yeah, no, you're lucky.
Yeah, go on, Mike. rather they say.
Ngiyabona.
Chop.
Angikinye. Ulelele no. Yenzile.
Tswela go ntle tswela go. Good.
Yeah.
Alright, sharp.
Yes.
Now relax, please.
In fact,
Utwami.
yes, we promote made in Africa.
Oh, that's good.
Long tie, short
Everyone
sleeves.
made in Africa, except Australia.
Dada Mukoki.
Yeah. Yatunjikela njani?
There's this. It's Cape Town. What's it, Cape Town?
Oh! You want to take them with Jiban Sanam, so I can't.
No, it's okay, we understood. But the event went well, so there was no train smash here.
But quietly, Ebefuna sends into format.
Oh, that's fine.
The Cape Town event, you know about it?
No, I don't know about it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Never
you let
mind.
me know. You have my
I've got
details.
your contact, your
Yes.
PA, I've
Yes.
got their contact.
Yes.
But Sasi Kebile Njenoputi
No, that's fine.
He would like to organize a side event.
Yes, okay.
In something, say, Cape Town.
Yes. No.
Involving you guys.
No problem. So,
Really, Mukhandat. Uhleli phezu komdwabo.
My phone is busy there.
It's
fine, I'll keep
There are two things you should understand.
Go Portugal.
There are two things you should understand.
In the Commonwealth,
When you are
meetings
ready,
after
Make sure the book.
your standards.
When you're in London,
I still am.
she's there. So you just look from
Ask your memory.
No,
I want to eat what you eat.
The demand.
No, she's late.
So